All right, good morning. My name is Josh Hirschberger. I serve as General Counsel and lead the Church Ambassador Network for Indiana Family Institute. That's the Focus on the Family affiliated group. It's my honor today to facilitate this legislative forum for Right to Life of Northeast Indiana. I appreciate Zach and the invitation to be here today. Definitely an honor. This is a forum where you can come and hear from your legislators. It's been a fast-paced session, so it's great to have them here. And thank you for coming out despite the cold and it being early in the morning. So thank you for being here. Let's open in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we think of the drafters of our 1851 Constitution, and as they said, we also are grateful to you as Almighty God for the right to choose our form of government. Thank you for the opportunity to govern ourselves. Thank you for these legislators. We believe from Romans 13 that you've appointed them to this time and this place for our good. So please be with them and their family. Thank you for our state. Thank you for our legislature, our governor, signing a bill to protect the most vulnerable among us, becoming, in a sense, kind of an island right here in our part of the country. God, we continue to pray for efforts at our State House, protecting babies in the womb, protecting human beings all the way from conception until natural death. I just thank you for each one of these legislators here, the sacrifice that they make to go down to Indianapolis, the time away from family. So just strengthen their families, give them the courage, fortitude, endurance that they need as we finish up this fast-paced session. I also just pray that you'd bless our time together today. May it be uplifting. May we also leave here with a better understanding of how we individually can push this issue forward, something very close to your heart, protecting the unborn. Pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, if you would stand with me, we're going to give a pledge of allegiance. Yeah, we got run the flag. All right. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. So a few announcements as we get started. First, I wanted to thank Senator Liz Brown here as one of our panelists, as one of the sponsors of this forum, as well as U.S. Senator Todd Young. Let's give Senator Brown and Senator Young a round of applause for appreciation. Now, you may have a folder in front of you, and if you do not have one, please pick one up during our time together. And there you're going to see a few things. You'll find a directory of your elected officials you can take a look at. A sheet of legislative updates. This has been a very fast-paced session, so you can see where some of the bills are, the ones that are being tracked. An upcoming events flyer. I don't want to miss any events coming up this year with Right to Life. Also, a pen and a card. This is important. A pen and a card to write down any questions. Some of you look like you have some burning questions out there. This is your chance. I want to note a specific time, 10:10. All right, 10:10 is the last opportunity to hand a question to the Right to Life staff so that you can ask the question of the panelist. And if you want to direct your question to a particular legislator, go ahead and write that on the card so that we can direct it to that person. Again, 10:10, make sure you get those in so we can get those to the legislators. Also in there, you'll find a donation envelope to help Right to Life defray operational costs. I think this is an amazing venue for this event, and I'm so blessed to be able to come to some of the dinners and just see all of the great work that Right to Life is doing. So a donation, however big or small, helps push that forward, helps them expand the team and all that they're doing. If you'd like to just put that in the bucket on the registration table when you leave, that would be greatly appreciated. And you can also take that home and fill it out later. Feel free to take that entire envelope with you, or if you want to just take the materials, leave it there on the table, that would be fine as well. Now, before we introduce our legislative panel, I also wanted to point out that Landon Porter is here. Where was Landon? Right back here, who is representing Senator Jim Banks' office. Now, the elected officials here, as many of you know, they are our champions for life. They and their staff each legislative session, also back here in district, are pushing forward the sanctity of life, protection of the unborn, and so we want to thank them for all that they're doing. I want to go through and just introduce our panel. Some of you may know these individuals, some may not. First, right here to my left, we have State Senator Liz Brown, who's representing District 15. Next, we have State Senator and Assistant Majority Caucus Chair Dr. Tyler Johnson, who represents District 14. Then we have Representative Christopher Judy for District 83. And then we have the Executive Vice President of Indiana Right to Life, Zach Rogers, who I think pretty much is like camped at the State House this legislative session. I think they make him leave at some point, but he's there whenever I'm there, so I appreciate his work. Well, let's go ahead and go down the line, starting with Senator Brown. If you would just further introduce yourself and share what initially drew you to public service.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks all of you for coming out. I know many of you were here when we did the march, so appreciate your support for life. So I was a stay-at-home mom for until my youngest started high school, and first ran for city council. And the reason was, here in Fort Wayne, I wanted to just see if I could make a difference in our community. And then once you do get into elected office, you realize the bigger issues can't be resolved, particularly the life issues, unless you go down to the State House. And that has been a leading passion for me since I've been elected. I passed out some of the legislation. It's hard to believe all the things we did before Dobbs passed and before we were able to pass such a pro-life legislative act in order to save more babies. But, you know, I think what's important is the history, legislative history has shown you can never stop. And so that's what really drives me, is we're constantly educating and pushing this issue. It's most fundamental. So I would say that's what it.
Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Well, I'm kind of the youngest legislator, newest legislator, I guess, on the panel, but I'm an ER doc here in town, and big part of the reason I ran was to tackle the life issues. Before I got in the legislature, one of the things we were just talking about this morning was a group of doctors and I sued the Biden administration over the abortion pill. These folks did a good job of passing I would argue, the most pro-life piece of legislation before I got there, but soon after Dobbs was decided at the Supreme Court, three friends and I got together with some advocacy groups and ended up suing Biden and going to the Supreme Court. We've talked about that before, but went all the way to the Supreme Court, talked about the abortion pills and the problems it causes and the damage it causes and the decisions that the Biden administration made that made it even worse. And, you know, with every abortion pill, a baby dies, but also it causes great harm to the mom in the process. And so a big piece of legislation we're working on this year, we'll talk about some more, but it's really culminated in that. And a few states have actually brought our lawsuit back. We lost at the Supreme Court on standing, but something interesting happened at the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court justices usually never do, and they tell you exactly how to win. And so in the opinions, they told the states exactly the roadmap to come back, and that process is just starting. So it's been an interesting process the last 3 years, 4 years now, and glad to be a part of this.
Good morning. My name is Chris Judy. I represent District 83, which is portions of Allen, Whitley County. I've been in the state legislature since 2014 when I was elected. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, which deals with all the budgetary issues for the state. I also sit on the Financial Institutions Committee, along with Veterans Affairs, Public Safety. A little background, I served in the Indian National Guard for 7 years, from 2004 to 2011. I was a medic with the 1st 93rd here. We did a tour in Iraq in 2008. When I came home from that deployment in 2009, the Obama administration had taken over this country, and it was kind of hard to even understand what this country looked like those next 3-4 years. So that's kind of what started my my lead into politics and listening to Glenn Beck talk at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And then so I decided to get involved in 2012 as a precinct committee and delegate to the state convention. And then in 2014, some folks asked me to consider running for state rep, and I told them absolutely not. I was working third shift at General Motors, and then the 2014 session happened. Some votes were made. I think the key one was the marriage amendment and allowing Hoosiers to decide that issue, not politicians, along with three other issues. So ended up running and won in that primary, and then got down to the state house and realized you got to be able to govern too. So there was learning that whole process over the last 12 years, and still learning today. But one of the key issues for me was always life, family, the protection of the homeschooling. We were a homeschool family, and school choice was a huge thing, and making sure that folks have the right to raise their child in the education system that they want. So again, I think one of the top things I think once I leave this position is working with these folks in 2022 and getting that across the line. So that special session will probably be the highlight of what we were able to accomplish in my time down here. So.
I'll switch it up real quick since I'm not in public service. I'll say in my ministry. For me, this is the absolute ultimate issue of our day. I argue, and we get asked the question of, like, on the political front, why do we survey all the way down to Township Advisory Board? And for me, there's two parts. One, Township Advisory Board members become county council members, who become state representatives, who become governors. But the other part is, if you don't get the life issue correct, I don't trust you on any of the issues. So you've got to have that right, or else you are more likely going to be susceptible to choosing to not do the right thing in other areas. I joke that maybe I'm the only one that's wise enough not to run for public office up here. No, I'm just kidding. These are all wonderful people, and I'm thankful for each one of them stepping up. I've worked in a lot of different fields in my time, and I've worked a lot with politics. I started working in the political world in 2004, and have been involved ever since. And there have been ups and downs in that process, but I see the hard work that goes into it from behind the scenes on a lot of these folks, that they really genuinely do care about this issue and they want to do what's right. And so this is a really great opportunity for these folks to be able to share with you what they're doing behind the scenes.
All right, well, thank you to our panelists. I want to move now into some questions. I'm going to direct that question to a particular person on the panel, but the remainder of the panelists, feel free to jump in if you have something to add, or if you strongly disagree. That would be kind of fun too. I'm just joking. All right. So the first one goes to Senator Liz Brown. Senate Enrolled Act 442 passed in 2025, and it requires schools to teach human sexuality and to include medically accurate, age-appropriate instruction on fetal development. So why do you think that's important in our schools, and what impact you hope that law has?
No, that's there's a video out, Baby Olivia, which is one of the, I think it's almost a 3-minute video, which would qualify as that curriculum. And I don't think, as we're trying to get our young people to understand the importance of life and the value of human life and dignity, is you can't educate them too much and too soon. And it's always amazing to me when it's important, the word you said, medically accurate, when you're trying to educate with medically accurate scientific information, and the pro-choice side is always still pushing back, and they don't want that information to get out. There's just no excuse for that. But, you all know, that you who work in this pro-life area as well, once you start to educate people that that's a baby, that's a human being, it makes a difference. It changes their outlook, not just on abortion and those issues, but just the dignity of the human being and how we're going to care for them after they're born, the resources that the mom needs, the resources that a young baby and a child may need that has some special needs. And so I think it's so important we do that, but it is always amazing to me when we introduce legislation like that, how much pushback we get. because it's just science, right? It's just, if nothing else, it's science, and they still give you a hard time trying to get that introduced. But I think that will be really important because we've become so secular in our educational processes. You know, those of you who homeschool, you're able to educate your children in a Christian-based way and share these life issues with them. But in the schools, they don't want to have any of that discussion. But we know they're pushing their own agenda. So that was a huge win for us.
Well, I wanted to turn to Senator Johnson next, and I know all of us are thinking about the abortion pill. Just a quick story. At the annual banquet for our local pregnancy care center, I live down in Madison, a young woman was there to give her story, and she talked about how she took that first pill, but when she received the abortion pill, it was in a Ziploc bag with no instructions on what to take first, what to take second. Fortunately, she came into the center. She had been to church, in fact, to our church, and over time, God just worked in her heart. And then towards the end of her testimony, she picks up her baby. So she did the reversal, and I was like, just take my money. All right, just take my money. So we know this is the critical issue, and these senators and our rep have been working on that. Senate Bill 236 is passed through the Senate, referred over to the Public Health Committee. What impact would this bill have in moving the culture of life forward?
Yeah, so we talked about the abortion pills and the work that I've been trying to do in the past, and Josh hit on it pretty well of like the harms that the abortion pill really causes to women. As an ER doc, it's unfortunate the number of women that end up in our emergency departments with even just side effects, but really bad complications. I had the opportunity to have some of that testimony read at the Supreme Court about a young lady that essentially almost bled to death after just getting abortion pills in the mail. And they drove to Illinois to take them because they wanted to be safe and then come back. And on the way back, she essentially died and we had to revive her. And so it is a very dangerous, scary thing. You had members of the Biden administration saying it's safer than Tylenol. When 1 in 20 people have a serious complication, not including the death of the child, it's a very serious thing. So Senate Bill 236, this is actually the fourth iteration of this bill. We've brought a different version every year. And in politics, sometimes timing is everything, but between it being a election year and it having worked it out a lot better, we got the bill to move through the Senate. What the bill underlying does, in its current version, it goes after the abortion pill distributors. So these internet companies and manufacturer, it's not really the manufacturers distribute or supply these distributors, but these are the coordinators of what you would go online, put a little information in, have it shipped to your house. It goes after the folks that are doing that bad act, which is illegal in Indiana already. But what Massachusetts, Delaware, California has said, Indiana, we don't care about your laws. We're just going to shield these folks from your laws and say, oh, we're just going to allow that to happen. After the Dobbs decision, about a year later, some friends and I were having a discussion, and one of our friends is actually very involved in the online pro-life community and works cybersecurity. And it's interesting, they had found data that was unsecured by one of these companies to show their distribution lists. And so we know from the one company, there's at least 5,000 pills a year coming in from that company, upwards of 8,000 depending on the unique addresses. So from one of the 5 major companies, we're getting 5,000 to 8,000. So if you extrapolate that out to 5 or 7 other companies, we're getting quite a few pills shipped into Indiana every year. And I guarantee it's only gotten worse since then. And so got some good legal minds together and said, how do we get after this? And so the only way to get after them is to push it into federal court. And so we're passing a state law that would get into federal court and hopefully challenge those other states' right to shield some of these companies, because a federal judge is going to decide. And so it is a very complicated legal piece. I'm ER doctor, as I said, so we've gotten the lawyers involved in that discussion to make sure we're on good ground. The bill is in really good shape. It came out of the Senate essentially unchanged from a legal standpoint. We cleaned up some of the language, but a lot of the Democrats couldn't even really, pro-choice folks pro-abortion folks couldn't even challenge it because of the way it's written. And so it was interesting to see that discussion, and it passed out, I think, 35-10, which for a piece of pro-life legislation, it can be a lot closer than that. And so and from the Senate, which our House members usually give us a harder time on some of these things because the senators can be a little bit more difficult on conservative issues, but even on the life issue, getting pro-life pieces of legislation out. And like I said, this is the fourth year I've brought a different iteration. To be fair, the last four pieces haven't been as well thought out as this is. We got as many of the pro-life legal minds involved, and we've been able to kind of work it through the process a couple times now, and I think we've got a really good piece of legislation. It's a fairly novel approach that Indiana's going to take, and hopefully it's in the House now. We're looking to get a hearing in Public Health Committee, and I know Rep. Judy will help us with that, but there's a really good opportunity to get this passed, and there's a few legal questions around it we're trying to answer, but this is a bill that I've spent, you could say, a lifetime working on, but it's got thousands and thousands of hours behind it at this point, and hopefully this is the year that we get it done. We are in a condensed session. There's only a few weeks left, so we should get a hearing this week or next, so look for that to come, and I look forward to that.
Well, I just want to thank our legislators, as Senator Johnson just kind of passed over it, but that's 4 different times, 4 different years. I know Senator Brown has brought pro-life legislation year after year. I think there's an old Spurgeon quote, with perseverance, the snail reached the ark. That's always kind of a fun thought. Sometimes it's like that. And so as you pray for them, you think about them, want to encourage them, that is quite a process.
Hey, Josh, before you jump into the next one, I can't help myself but talk on that too.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you here, and a lot of you are super pro-life, and so if you want to enjoy a little bit of a legislative beatdown, go back and watch the hearing in the Senate Judiciary with Senator Johnson and Senator Brown, kind of going at the majority of those that testified were abortionists. And they don't call themselves that. They're doctors from the local hospitals and the universities. But I don't want to use the word hilarious, but at some point, they're arguing stuff that's not in the bill. They're going after the 2022 law. They're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the actual bill because it's all a distraction for them. They just care about getting that money back, that money flowing back to do more abortions in the state of Indiana. And quite frankly, it was disgusting. At one point, one of the ladies, and Senator Brown went sort of after and then kind of backed off to we're going to let the legal side work on this. One of the ladies admitted that her coworker illegally ordered abortion pills to use on herself. It was wild what they're willing to say on camera. But anyway, I can't help myself on that one.
We have a very technical legal term for that. It's called oops.
And you guys probably pay attention a little bit, but the way the process goes is you present a bill in a committee. And so this bill went in front of the Judiciary Committee, which Senator Brown sits on, and Senator Carrasco, Senator Freeman, Senator Clark, and Senator Cook. So we've got actually a very good pro-life representation there. So it was a favorable committee for the bill to go to, but it was interesting to see fellow physicians. I hate to say we set them up a little bit, but there was language in the bill that they were very focused on that it probably wasn't going to stay in the bill anyway, but they made some comments that weren't true, and then they made some comments that they were trying to a cardiologist of all folks was testifying on abortion, which I thought was interesting, but they were trying to get at that we did the wrong thing in 2022, which has already been resolved. It's already gone through the courts and all those kind of things. And so not one of them commented on abortion pills, which was very interesting in a 2-hour-long discussion. And so about a bill that's only about abortion pills. So if that tells you where it went. But I just want to thank Senator Brown for her comments and work during that committee, because she was on point the entire time and challenged them for everything that they essentially were trying to manipulate. So thank you, Senator Brown.
All right, well, over to Representative Judy. In the 2022 special session, the state legislators passed SEA1 became the first state out of the gate after Dobbs to protect life. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and the impact that bill has had?
Well, we can be the first state to do things. I think that we proved that. I'll tell you, that was a two-week session, a special session, and just to think that we were even down there having the opportunity to do this. If you'd have told me in 2014 when I was elected that we'd actually have that opportunity, that's a big thanks to the Trump administration and putting in those Supreme Court justices to give us that opportunity. But it was interesting. There was folks across the board on where we should land. I would have preferred not to have the exemptions. I think we had those discussions behind the scene. Thankfully, the senators beside me were in those discussions as well, along with some of you, of just how to get to where we need to get to, and making sure that our constituents knew where we stand. And I give props to the leadership to allow us to have those votes and to have those discussions in the public. But it landed where it's landed, and then you see the results now that we've almost ended almost all abortions in the state happening in the state. So it was like I said earlier, it's probably the highlight when I'm done with this and going, wow, those 2 weeks were special for the state and for all of us. And again, these folks had Senator Brown was, yeah. Those 2 weeks was, can I say bulldog? Do you want to talk about a voice down there? And I'm not a doctor. Both are an attorney with that expertise, but to have folks down there fighting for life and having those expertise is very, very helpful. So,
thank you for mentioning that. And so I was there, and again, just thanking our legislators, as a pastor as well, the weight of those 2 weeks was just incredible. And I remember one particular day, of course, you have protesters screaming, and the senators are having to try to find their way out to their cars without being harassed. And I remember this one particular day where the screaming, the expletives, and a group just standing there singing Amazing Grace. And the contrast was just so stark. And sometimes maybe I don't always take time to celebrate, but then after 50 years, we can do that here in our state. And so I wanted, even just this morning, to be able to just thank the Lord. And let's go ahead and thank Representative Judy and Senator Brown for that work again. So over to Zach. Once again, the annual end of life options bill, HB 1011, was filed. What's the current status of that bill, and what implications would it have if passed?
Yeah, thanks. It is once again not going to, didn't get a hearing, so it's done. So thankfully, once again, that bill didn't see the light of day. But it does continuously, which, by the way, 1011, which the first 10 bills in the House are reserved for the Speaker in the House priority bills, but it's pretty much first come, first serve. When you get there, you file. So that tells you Representative Pierce from Bloomington, the People's Republic of Bloomington, he gets there the first minute that office is open so that he can be the first bill. It's House Bill 1011 every single cycle. And it shines a light, though, on an issue that we're seeing, especially in the life movement, to recognize that it's conception to natural death. That is what we're fighting for as an organization. And we can't let the the folks that are speaking about giving people a peaceful death confuse you as to what this really is. 12 states now in the U.S. actually allow for assisted suicide, and even more with euthanasia is illegal, but assisted suicide, the government killing you, and you choosing to do so. In the Netherlands, it is now accessible for those that are 12 and older. In Canada, the new part doesn't go into effect until 2027. But the law is, it started, you have to be terminally ill and you're going to die in 6 months. Then it became, you just have to be diagnosed with a terminal illness, which I don't know, I hate to tell everybody, but we've all got terminal illnesses. I mean, my plan is to live forever, and so far so good, but I don't think that works. The third thing they added was any mental health issues. So if you have some diagnosed depression, and you're, at least in Canada, 17 years old or older, you can actually have the government kill you, which is horrifying. It is the fastest way to die in Canada, as in like the fastest growing way to die. And as of last year, it's 5% of all deaths in Canada are the government killing its own people. It's mind-blowing that this stuff is growing. So I'm thankful, I think it was maybe 2024 that Senator Johnson did the resolution that actually spoke out on the exact opposite, which I love. I wish, Representative Pierce, that was the one time I wish he was a senator so he could hear that. Yeah. Not for your sake, but for this issue at least. Spoke out against that and says, no, we're not for that. We're a pro-life state, and that includes all the way to the dignity at the end of life and the caring for those that are at the end of life. And we'll get into some of the reasons of why we care for people, but every single person has value regardless of their circumstance. And so end of life, it doesn't magically disappear because you have a tough situation or diagnosis or anything. So thankfully it's once again done for this session. I have no doubt it'll be back as House Bill 1011 next year, and we'll be down there. By the way, you thought I camp out a lot. Now you should have seen me in 2022. I didn't miss a minute. It was 7:01. I was in there, and I was there till probably 1 a.m. most of those nights with these fine folks. And Senator Johnson, who wasn't quite in there yet, but he was there a whole lot too. So that was a pretty wild time.
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah, so the physician-assisted suicide, they call it medical aid in dying up in Canada. And I think it's actually an interesting thing to look at, because Canada started off with, it's always the ALS scenario. It's Lou Gehrig's disease kind of locked in, the worst of the worst things you can die from. But to Zach's joke, I tell patients all the time, every patient I've ever taken care of is going to die, right? And so you can't compassionately take care of somebody you're willing to kill. And so it becomes really difficult once you cross that line to have good medicine in a state or a country. And so in Canada, what's interesting is they've actually changed the way they do statistics to get to that 5% number, because if you have cancer or depression or any of those things, they've started putting your physician-assisted suicide on the bottom of the list below your other diagnoses, so it doesn't count in your top things. And so there's a few people who believe it's actually the second leading cause of death behind cancer in Canada now. And so that's insane, actually, when you think about heart disease and accidents and things like that. And so it just tells you when the government starts to get involved, or even physicians, because if it's hard to be compassionate and take care of you, you get kind of that compassion fatigue. And then it's just like, you know what? It's probably easier for you to take this pill and just go to sleep, right? And really, we should care to people. And it doesn't mean that you have to have advanced life support, those kind of things, but there is a compassionate way to care for people. And it's it's, to me, it drawn that line in the sand, and I felt it was really important. I think in 2024, we did this resolution, and we actually took it through committee, had it through the whole chamber, and part of that point was to make these points and just say, hey, not here in Indiana, we're not going to do this, we're never going to do this, and just let all of the legislators know what was behind it and why the progress had been made in other states, and to kind of push back. And it went actually really well. So I appreciate your guys' help on that.
I think what people really need to understand is, so that movement, if you will, started right as assisted suicide, which sounds awful. So then they changed it, euthanasia. No one knew what that meant. And then it became death with dignity. That was another term. And then it was physician-assisted suicide, but then physicians got squeamish. They didn't want to be part of suicide. So now we've on this medical aid in dying, the acronym MAID. It just sounds so nice and soothing, right? And that's what happens all the time. I can't tell you, one time in a health committee hearing, we had a group, it was about, I think, expanding access to care for those with disabilities, particularly children. And we had some parents come and speak to the committee. Some of them had children with very significant disabilities, wheelchair-bound, chest, trach tubes, and everything. They were going to need significant care for the rest of their lives. There was an individual, he was the executive director of the organization that oversaw all of these groups that were involved with that kind of, with those kind of children with disabilities, saying, you know, we need more care, this legislature needs to be more supportive. The next bill that came up in that committee, you can't make this up, was one of the many, you know, stabs we made before Dobbs to add more pro-life protections. And that same executive director came and testified on why we needed to have abortion and why the bill we were going to hear that would have put in some protections, whether it was banning sex selection or informed consent. And I called him out. I was just flabbergasted, because the very people, because then people came and testified, we need to be able to abort these children. They're going to be born with disabilities. It's going to be a burden to the parents and a burden to themselves. The very person who had just testified in a bill that these people, we're not supporting them enough, came and testified they should all be gone. And I called him out. Never saw him again. I think he lost his job, I'm not going to lie. But I'm just telling you, it doesn't matter. We think, how could you be such a hypocrite and act like that? They're just going to keep working at it and working at it. They have no respect for life at all. It's not just, oh, it's an inconvenience for the mom. We need to, you know, let her make the decision. It's her choice, her baby, her body. No, it goes the whole way through. They pretend that they care, you know, and we're not doing enough for this. That's what they say to us. You're not doing enough for this group of people, therefore you don't really care, you're not pro-life. They don't really care at all. It was probably one of the most jarring, appalling experiences I had, that person could be such a, and then when you get to this suicidal ideations and we talk about teens and their mental health, and they might, and then the same people are saying, yeah, they should be able to kill themselves, but it's death with dignity. And you're like, wait, I thought you just said we need to do more in the mental health to help these troubled teens. No, we should just let them kill themselves. You're like, do you understand? And that's why, getting back to like baby Olivia, we have to start educating our youth so early, because these people are not going to do that.
Senator Brown, back to you with termination of pregnancy reports, known as TPRs, have long been available for public access, and that helps provide accountability and oversight for the abortion law. The Indiana Court of Appeals upheld privacy of TPRs, that those could be shielded from public scrutiny back in December of 2025, and that's in opposition to a previously signed executive order. So what is the importance of making those TPRs visible to the public?
So it just goes to show you, just because you're a Republican, you're not pro-life. Let me just underscore that, right? Because the previous governor's administration, at the very end of their term, wrote an executive order that did not allow those termination of pregnancy reports, which in this neck of the woods, as I'm looking at Kathy Humberger, that's why we got rid of that abortion doctor. In theory, at the time pre-Dobbs, Everyone was supposed to submit those, at the very least, so you weren't breaking the law, right? No abortions on minors. And only because, of course the abortion doctors break the laws, only because of the hard work of people like Kathy Kumberger who looked over those reports did we see they were breaking the law, and did that doctor have to lose his license, and that was the beginning for us to move forward with at least banning abortion clinics in Indiana. But it just goes to show you the power of one executive. Because that executive, the previous governor, wrote that executive order, we have been fighting it now in court to get those reports so someone that we trust can be looking at them to make sure that the doctors that are legally able to perform the limited number of abortions in this state are following the law. And in that committee hearing that Zach referenced with Senator Johnson's bill in judiciary, that's why those doctors were there. That's why we had family practice residents and cardiologists and et cetera. They don't want any information out there. They don't want anyone looking over their shoulder, right? Because they don't want, they want to be able to get close to the edge and skirt the law. So that is so important. It was so disappointing that that executive order was signed, but now that it's in the courts, our hands are tied until that's resolved. I'm hoping we will be successful, and then we will put it into law that there will always be transparency in that space.
Thank you for your work on that. Senator Johnson, back to you. From your perspective, what additional policies or investments should the state consider to better support women and families during pregnancy and early parenthood, particularly in ways that would strengthen life laws and the pro-life cause?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think around we've kind of talked about it already, we've got a good abortion law that regulates abortion. There's a few exemptions in there. I'm with Rep. Judy on really the exceptions didn't necessarily need to be in there. The life of the mother is kind of the limit for me. And once you start talking about fatal fetal anomalies, we don't even know what that is in medicine. And so the OBGYNs, the maternal fetal medicine docs, they can't even really define that either. So, and that's from their own literature. So trying to figure out where to draw that line is really difficult. So I don't think you want to draw that line, right? And so we kind of allowed that. And that was probably the only misstep in that conversation. So I'd like to define that better. On the reporting side, we just talked about the TPRs. We've been working on that the last couple of years, trying to find a spot to kind of make sure that there's some type of review of that process, whether it's within the government. Now, we do have medical record standards, and that's what the court essentially said. And so the last 2 years, I've had a bill that's basically said, hey, we can release these, just follow our medical record standards for release. You can redact information. Here's what you can and can't redact. And we're getting kind of hung up with the court case because we don't want to, the court case is ongoing. And so you don't ever want to pass legislation necessarily in the middle of the court case because you don't know what the ruling is going to be. And so you kind of have to wait. And that's unfortunate. Now, we could preempt them and change the law and be directive. It's just not the standard we typically follow. I'd like to do that, to be honest. There's a lot of things in the state of Indiana we can still work on. I think support for moms is really good, but when you look out throughout the region, we're not very coordinated across Indiana. And so having if you think of like call before you dig type stuff, right? So it's really easy to know those phone numbers and that kind of stuff. And so I want to make it that simple of, hey, you're a young parent, you're looking for resources, you're just found out you're pregnant, you want help, you show up to an emergency department, where do you go next, right? And so those things happen every day, and unless you're really involved, you just don't know where those resources are. And that's some of our fault as the pro-life community of not, being coordinated and getting the message out there as well as we could. It's not always about dollars and resources. Sometimes it's just about more coordination. I think as a government in Indiana, we're falling short still when you look at our support in DCS systems and foster care. my wife and I are foster parents, and so the foster system is really broken. We are very hard on foster families and possible adoptive families, and so we want to make adoption ridiculously easy in the state of Indiana, and so we need to figure out ways to kind of make that simpler. We want to protect parental rights in that process, but especially when a mom does the hard thing of giving her baby up for adoption, I think it should be essentially free to families and support for the birth mom in that process. And we've gone through that 3 times as a family ourselves, and it's been very different every time. And so we've seen very different processes, and the legal course of that is very complex. So unless you have the means to get lawyers and agencies and all kinds of stuff involved, adoption can be way too difficult in the process. And so I want to make that stupid easy. And during the last governor campaign, it really came up quite a bit about adopting kids out of the foster system, but there's no way that we need to make it as complex as it is in private adoption. And so going forward, that's a big part of what I'm looking at. We have a bill in front of Judiciary in the House this week, actually, looking at the adoption process for foster families out of that. And so it basically tells them how to do it rather than this kind of piecemeal and treating foster families like they're criminals when they want to adopt a child. And so it's one of those things that's really important to get figured out. I do think overwhelmingly Indiana's a pro-life state. We've proven that over and over again, and I think getting hospitals and nonprofits kind of coordinated, though, is that big picture piece that I think we're missing throughout Indiana to kind of help women and prospective moms and people in tough spots to make us more pro-life.
Thank you. Representative Judy, as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, how do you see your role on the fiscal side intersecting with pro-life policy and priorities?
I think that really started in 2022 when we decided to say, hey, we need to bring wraparound services to those mothers that need it, especially during the pregnancy, but also the following 12 months. You know, we fund My Healthy Baby, I think, at $3.3 million a year right now. I think we can probably do more. Definitely, and I think that's probably discussions we need to have over this summer going into the next budget year. But again, we want to make sure that these women have a choice to actually and encourage and have those services to keep that baby instead of going to another neighboring state and unfortunately having abortions, because there's still options for them. They just got to drive to them. So I think that's a key of sitting on that Ways and Means Committee. And fortunately, I think we have many pro-life members on that Ways and Means Committee, and we as Republican control. So. But again, I think it's hearing from those on the ground floor. I think, not to repeat Senator Johnson, but again, we need to be encouraging foster families to foster, not discouraging them. So, and some of the stories coming out of DCS, unfortunately, it's a broken system. You're dealing with broken families, broken folks. It's just a matter of how do we make it better.
Yeah. I was just thinking this week in a committee hearing that I think lasted into the early evening, talking about just child care vouchers for foster parents, and all of those things may not initially think, oh, that's a pro-life issue, but you're strengthening that support around these families. So thank you for your work there. Zach, how is your role at Indiana Right to Life with your apparently campsite in the State House? How has that shifted your involvement in the political process?
Yeah, I've always been relatively involved at the State House just because I've had so many years of building relationships with legislators. But now, I am the naughty word of lobbyist, which is not really a bad word. But I am down there having these conversations with our legislators, not just in Northeast Indiana, but which, by the way, we have. And I know this is live streamed, but I'm sorry, we have the best delegation up in Northeast Indiana, particularly for the life issue. But I'm down there. We've got great all the way down to the southern tip of Indiana with Senator Byrne and his wonderful comments throughout session. But yeah, I'm spending a lot of time with the legislators talking through what is actually under our purview from an organizational standpoint and thinking big picture. You know, Senator Johnson and Senator Brown both hit on some of the stuff in the past, but then Senator Johnson particularly talking about some of the stuff that he would like to see way into the future. You know, my belief is when you're fighting for life from conception to natural death, this issue is not going away. So we're not going to not exist as an organization. We're going to continue to have to fight for every single person in their life. And so for me, it's not just what's this session about? It's conversations about what's next year with the budget session with Rep. Judy. What's 4 years from now? What are we going to be able to tackle? And also still be nimble enough in that process of saying, what can we do now to get to that 4 years from now, right? Like, we know the legislative process is sometimes unbearably slow, and we think, well, this is a problem. Why can't we just fix it? Just pass the bill and everything's fine. That's not how this works. So we've got to be thinking about long term. We've got to be thinking about what can we do now and in 4, 5, 10 years from now that affects the life issue.
I appreciate that, Zach. I know we've talked about sometimes our opponents on this issue think in generations while we're thinking in elections, and we've got to shift that. So I appreciate that perspective. So heading into a bit of a speed round here, back to Senator Brown, and we're going to kind of just go down the list. What is a bill that died in the first half of session that you wish would have passed and perhaps coming into 27 can be brought back up?
Redistricting. I mean, the consequences, we see what the Democratic states are doing. Virginia just signed their maps. When you look in D.C., excuse me, at the federal level, the Hyde Amendment is hanging on by a thread, and that prevents federal funds to going to fund abortions. And if you look at the states, for example, of New York, California, Governors Hochul and Newsom, I mean, they're going to go crazy with that, right? They both said they're not going to prosecute already doctors who are breaking our laws, for example, our pro-life laws. And so if they're allowed to require and or allow federal funds to fund abortions, it's going to be awful. So there are real world consequences to us not getting that done, because they're going to be such a slim majority that we have now in the House, and that's a problem. And that's why on the local level, I mean, Representative Judy's on Ways and Means. In the Senate, it's called the Appropriations Committee. And so you need to have pro-life people on those budget committees. It's really important because you start the conversation in those committees and behind closed doors on what are the priorities for your caucus, Republican senators or Republican House. And I think what Dobbs showed us is, yes, we passed one of the most pro-life laws in the country, but it should have been a lot easier to do it. And that was a real wake-up call for those of us who thought we had supermajority pro-life chambers. And that was a hard law to pass. And so in order for us to continue to fund these pro-life issues in the state, we need to make sure we have pro-life legislators elected and pro-life legislators who are on those committees. And that, because we're going to see, I'm afraid if we lose the House Congress, we're going to see hell and brimstone coming, frankly. So yeah, redistricting.
Same question?
Yes, same question, all the way down.
So, I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but the TPR provision of 236, I would have liked to seen move through just to keep pushing the conversation. And these termination of pregnancy reports are important, and actually getting the legal definition figured out a little bit better. One of the pieces we had in there I thought was really important was having a second set of eyes from the Office of Inspector General kind of to be a check on the Department of Health, who has been part of the problem in this process. And anybody who's worked in the space knows that they they probably follow the law, but they slow walk things, and sometimes they withhold things they probably shouldn't. And having a second set of eyes that is favorable would be a good thing. We may get there. We're still working on some things and working on some members of our side to try to get that language to move this session. And so trying to figure that out still.
Thank you. Representative Judy, same question. What bill died that you wish, would have made its way through?
I'm right there with Senator Brown, redistricting. I mean, that was an easy vote. After walking through it from the summer, first hearing, like, what are we doing this for? To seeing Texas getting the letter from the DOJ saying they needed to, they went forward. California retaliating. I can't say that word right. But then they're looking to eliminate all those Republican congressional districts on the northern side of the state, and then looking at Maryland, Virginia. They don't play by the same rules. And this was a legal way for us to be able to combat that. So again, if they win the election by 1 to 2 seats in November, shame on us. And what's the consequences of that? Because it's not only, there's global consequences there as well. There's global consequences, let alone what policies are going to be rammed down our throat, and again, starting impeachments and all of that. So these aren't your JFK Democrats. So I think we messed up big time there.
Thank you. Zach, anything? No.
There's a few things that I would have liked to have proposed, well, probably more than a few, as these guys would imagine, but not being a budget session, most bills that have any type of fiscal attached to it are not going to go anywhere. I think back into 22, Rep. Judy had indicated and talked about, you had SEA 1, but you also had SEA 2, which was the massive funding of the life issues, right? So if abortion is going to be banned, then we've got to put our money where our mouth is and fund things like the pregnancy resource centers, things like programming that helps moms and babies. And so I think if I were to say, we're going to pass something this session that we generally don't do, it would probably be revolving around funding and just being able to increase the work that the pregnancy resource centers are doing. And quite frankly, we have some unbelievable PRCs in Northeast Indiana, and we even have a executive director from one of the pregnancy resource centers here in the audience, maybe a couple. The work that they're doing on the front line is what allows us to do the education piece in a different and subtle way, and making sure they have the funding there is paramount, because they have to be able to reach mom where they're at. Abigail on our team often will say phrases like, if the baby is not the problem, abortion is not the solution, right? It's kind of a little catchy phrase, but the truth of that is these pregnancy resource centers are meeting mom where they're at. These women are going in, they're frightened, they're scared to death to tell anybody that they're pregnant, let alone figure out how they're going to pay for the car seat that gets baby home from the hospital. So we have to continuously be aware of the struggles of where the folks that are actually getting the abortion, where they're at in life. And so I think the funding of that, there was the Hoosiers Family First funding that was passed in 22 as part of that allowed for grants by these pregnancy resource centers to be able to fund projects that they may not otherwise be able to. And so I think we need to take a hard look at not just funding the health side of things of what these PRCs are doing, but also the projects that create long-term sustainabilities for moms, including like maternity homes and homeless pregnant women's shelters, like a Mother's Hope here in Fort Wayne is opening a second location. Like, they can house 6 women, which is great for those 6 women, but they've got a huge line of people ready to jump in. that need help. So what are we doing for those women? Are they just staying homeless? Are we actually meeting their needs? So that's a long-winded way of saying additional funding as funding becomes available, and knowing that it's a difficult time to figure out where all those pieces go.
That's great. Well, 10-minute warning, folks, on if you have a question to get those in. I just want to make sure you have that opportunity. Our next question, this will be for all of the panelists as well. We'll start with Senator Brown. What is the most effective way for people to voice their opinions to elected officials? That would be certainly at the local level, but also at the state level. I'm thinking it's probably bringing up a sign with some expletive about a public official, that might be the most effective. But no, please help us.
No to that. No, but we're very frugal. So senators share one staff with another senator. But we get emails and calls. But I think personal letters, writing a letter to us is helpful, because sometimes with all the emails, there's a lot of junk in there and you don't receive it. But inviting us to events like this, I don't know. I mean, obviously we have, I think, one of the strongest pro-life organizations in the state, and I've been coming to these for years in the March. But, kind of keep your legislators' feet to the fire and invite them often. Sometimes they have family and they have other jobs that they have to take care of, but that's important, because this is the best opportunity to meet us face to face, and I always enjoy the conversations.
Yeah, I would echo that, but I think the relationships really matter. I think developing good relationships with your legislators, I think a lot of people are scared to reach out and kind of get to know them. Even at the local level, I found that really interesting. I will have a friend from church or somebody be like, well, I would talk to him about it, but, right? And it's like, well, here's their phone number, give them a call. There's some weird disconnect there where there's a little bit of fear to make that connection. And I would tell you, even some of the senators we kind of fight with regularly, they'll take your phone call. They want to meet with you. They want to know. So, but the quickest way to change somebody's mind on an issue, especially important issues like this, is to develop a relationship with them and have those conversations and regular coffees and get a group of friends together to have a conversation with them. That's probably the easiest way. A random email at the last minute probably doesn't move a lot of people. An angry phone call to the office definitely doesn't. And so those things are great when we're trying to push an issue and it feels good, but it's really the groundwork of the years before, especially somebody who's softer on the life issue and the things that we care about. It takes relationship building and kind of that organization around that, and actually getting your group to be stronger of friends, church, organization, to be able to go to those senators or reps and have those tough conversations. And really what it comes down to a lot of times is they want to feel like they're supported by their community in making those decisions. I will tell you, I know Rep. Judy, I know Senator Brown, these are not tough decisions for them when it comes to a life issue, and that's a great thing, but not everybody down there is built the same way. And so even there are some legislators in our area, and I'm not going to call them out individually, but it's one of those things where they probably need some encouragement and to know that there's people around them that support them when they make these decisions. Because I will tell you, on the life issue, there's probably only a handful of people that lead at the State House. Rep. Judy kind of made a little dig on himself, but I was there every day during the 2022 special session, and having people with a backbone to make those decisions and just stand firm was the biggest part of the conversation. There was a few people trying to lead the policy decision, but knowing you had a lot of voices there to speak up when it came time to discuss a vote was super important. And so, but develop those relationships, have tough conversations. Even we're going into campaign season as soon as session's over, and I would say get to know everybody on the ballot and be willing to ask right where they stand on issues that are important to you, because it can be really hard as somebody who's, I was on the ballot one time. That's the only time I've ever been on the ballot, but I think it's really important when I vote, I want to know and meet those folks and ask those tough questions, and I think that's really important to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think definitely relationships matter, and getting to know constituents and know folks. But also, I think we kind of seen it with House Bill 1333 on our side in the past week. If you can come together as a group and educate us on a bill that's awful, it'll die. So that was a siding bill that was taking away local control for wind and solar, and then almost everything. So I think we saw that personally is contacting us, and it matters. And I'll be honest with you, it matters more when I hear from a constituent or someone in the area than it does from someone from Southern Indiana necessarily, because then I just say, well, they need to let their legislator know as well. But when it's coming from my district and hearing from my district and knowing where they stand on certain issues, that matters, because we have a state perspective as legislators that we look at, but then also there's not a single person down there in that building that votes for us. So it's also hearing from folks back home. And I think educating us on issues as well. So for example, I have not seen these bills yet. I don't sit on those committees that those bills are running through. So again, that's a lot of education of talking with them back and forth of what's going on with this, because being on Ways and Means, that's not going to necessarily come through my way, or Veterans Affairs or financial institutions. So the first time I may see that bill is on second reading on the floor. So I think, again, educating, if you have bills that you feel that are important to you, reaching out to your legislator and say, hey, take a look at this bill. This is doing this is doing that. And if you can get more and more folks that you know to contact us, that puts a red flag on that bill, or it puts a green flag on that bill to say that's a great bill. So.
Yeah, the other thing I will touch on too is, I think sometimes we take for granted this fact, but all three of these folks and our panelists that we always have are unbelievably accessible. It's a part-time legislature. They actually have, big boy and big girl jobs back home. They go back home. They're with their people. They're at your churches. They're regular attenders of all of these things. And I will just say, I know the criticism from the other side sometimes is, oh, do this, do that. I don't ever see you here or there. I'm like, well, you clearly don't attend anything on the pro-life front, because I think I see all three of you more than I see my family. So, these folks are wonderfully accessible. And getting to know them and being able to ask those questions. The other thing I'll touch on too, real quick, is oftentimes, and we do this often with the federal, but I think we do this with you guys as well. We see these folks on TV, we see ads on the commercials, we kind of create a caricature in our brains of these elected officials. And the reality is these are actual people. I don't know if you know that. They have dreams and wants and families and people that they care about. And so things actually do affect them positively and negatively. So keep in mind that these are real people that have lives and are doing the best that they can to serve you and serve the constituents that they have. But getting to know them, treating them like a real person and caring about them, because especially on the pro-life front, we care about them because they are a person. It happens to be that they're alongside us 100% of our issues, but we actually do care about them just as a person. So I think when you treat them with respect and going into it, hey, I love you regardless of the situation, but here's where I'm at on this bill, is really important to keep in mind each time you interact with them.
That's great. Well, we're going to turn to some questions now, and we will get through as many of them as we can. Apologies if we can't get to all of them. There will be a time at the end to be able to come up and talk with the legislators. So if we don't make it to your question, make sure you come up and ask. So the first question is, what more can be done to help moms who choose life? Many of these moms and infants are in difficult situations. Diaper bank programs are often key. Can the legislators speak to that? And perhaps, Senator Johnson, you had maybe spoken a little bit about this before. Could maybe you take point on this and then others jump in?
Yeah, so we have a couple great organizations here in Fort Wayne that help moms specifically with early childhood. Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies comes to mind. A lot of our pregnancy resources centers where think of all the essentials, cribs, diapers, food. And so I actually think we do a really good job once moms get there, my hard part is just getting them there. And so I think that's a big part of it. And actually, we have, even in, I think of my smaller cities, Auburn, New Haven, the areas I represent, there's good resources there too. So I think we actually do a very good job with the caveat of just making sure women know those resources are there, and that getting them there is a big part of that.
And not to set the House member against the Senate, but was the House doing a diaper drive? I think, yes.
We're doing.
Please.
So we always pick a nonprofit to help out every year and do a drive for them. And we're doing I think it's the Indiana Diaper Bank.
Yes.
We're doing a diaper drive, so donating diapers, and that's what we're doing for our thing this year. So, but I think a lot of it, we look for government a lot of times, but I also think we need to look to the nonprofits in our churches and seeing what we're doing within our community as well to help. Government can't be the answer to everything. So I just want to remind everybody, we still got to look to our community and folks within the community to step up as well.
That's great.
I'm going to jump in too real quick. The other side of this often will claim like, oh, that you guys are pro-birth and not pro-life, but the reality is it's the pro-life movement that is actually running all of the pro-life or all of the pregnancy resource centers and the diaper banks and all of the different organizations that are helping moms through this process are almost exclusively on our side of the issue, right? The other real quick plug I will say is all three of these people are regular donors. Anytime we do any type of drive, it's hilarious to see Senator Brown will show up with an entire truckload of stuff, and she'll be unloading this stuff in jeans and a t-shirt, and you're like, oh, you're a state senator, but she just is very generous and probably is mad that I'm even bringing it up. But all of these folks are super generous on this issue, and they put their money where their mouth is in their personal piggy banks.
There's a recent book, Life After Roe, by David Clausen. He has an entire chapter where he documents a lot of this. If you're looking for that data, that's a great kind of compilation of that. Next to TPRs, and we'll come back to Senator Brown on this one, how do you address those who oppose public TPRs based on the argument of there being too much personal information on these reports?
Excuse me, that's what the pro-choice groups have continued to say, and the physicians who testified on, they weren't testifying on Senator Johnson's bill, they were just testify to show their support of pro-choice. But they've always been in place, since the 70s? And just to show you how much the other side wants abortion is, once our post-Dobbs pro-life bill was passed, they said, well, you can't have TPRs because some communities will have so few abortions, we'll be able to figure out who the person is, who the mother is. So we don't want any transparency anymore. And again, the whole point of it is to make sure that the women are actually, for example, with abortion pills, that they're getting the abortion pill reversal information. When I first carried that legislation, it was a House bill. The senator whose committee it was said that's just junk science. Wouldn't hear the bill. A couple years later, we heard the bill, and we had people saying it's all hocus pocus. It doesn't really work. We had women testifying with babies in arms, saying they found a resource online on their own, got the abortion pill reversal process started in time to have a healthy baby. They're in your committee room testifying with a baby, and people still don't believe it. So I just say, with respect for TPRs, these termination of pregnancy resorts, they have never revealed the personal information about the mother who had the abortion. It's all about making sure the physician, the doctor, or whatever that person was who did the abortion was following the laws. So for them to come now, it's just grasping at another straw because they don't want any transparency. So we have to continue to hammer on that issue.
So, Don Representative Judy, the question is about township trustees. If the legislation shuts down township trustees and boards, how could that impact local individuals and their assistance, and especially assistance for pregnant moms? If townships are shut down, where would that money go? Who would steward it, and where would pregnant moms go? So essentially, you got township trustees and the impact on this issue.
So, as we look at, we can go half hour on this. As we look at property tax, and we look at you have taxing units within your taxing district, and one of your taxing units is your township government. So one of the things we've really looked at is as we move into consolidating fire protection, whether it's a fire district or a fire territory, that responsibility is no longer part of the township government. That role of the township government pretty much is poor relief, cemeteries, and sometimes parks. So, at that point, is there really a need for township government, or can those responsibilities be absorbed by either the county the township is in or the city that the township is in? And then if that is absorbed, you eliminate that taxing unit within that taxing district. So I look at it as if that is the key responsibility for township government is fire protection. You look out in Whitley County, all those townships have fire departments. There's no district, there's no territory. They stay the same. I can tell you 3 years ago, Super Bowl Sunday, my mother dropped dead. She had a pacemaker, defibrillator. Thankfully, it kept her alive. First person there was a first responders from Jefferson Township. There's a need for them. But also what's happening is if you look at the average age of a volunteer firefighter, it's over the age of 55, and they're not being replaced, and you still need those services. So as we look as a body going forward of making sure that rural America still has those services, why if those services are no longer being offered by the township but are being created by another taxing unit that you're being taxed for, that territory or that district, why do we still want to tax you for township government for poor relief in cemeteries and parks? So that's the gist of the bill that passed out of the House. That's now over in the Senate, which I don't believe will land where it's at. It'll probably be pulled back some. I think it's compromise. We're getting a bill from the Senate that's coming over to us that does much less. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But as we reform and we're looking, because this gets into, we are a constitutional rate-based system when it comes to property tax, but we live in a system that's levy-driven, and that's a whole nother discussion. But going forward, as we move forward, we need to really go to a rate-based system. That when your local government raises your rate, your bill goes up. When they lower the rate, the bill goes down. Right now, your rate on your property tax bill is just a byproduct of the levy and debt services. So, that, like I said, I can go, but that's the reasoning for that bill. Again, I support it. If I look at a Boyd Township, that bill also says there's a threshold of 6,700 population of 6,700 or less. So right now, Boyd Township would not be eliminated. But then I look at a Boyd Township, and they are now part of a fire district, West Central. I think we need to have those discussions, because that can be absorbed by another unit, and it's looking back to the taxpayer and the property taxes, so, and being efficient.
Some great questions here this morning. So next one, I'll come back to Senator Johnson. How will SB 236 be enforced, or is this all about a court challenge? The challenge is good, but asking for clarity.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's a very legalistic bill. I don't normally carry law bills. I'm in Judiciary Committee for almost all my bills this year, so that's changed. But the goal of the bill is really the chilling effect against some of these agents that want to ship pills in. That's the overall goal. Now, from a legal standpoint, no government actor can actually sue under our provisions. So the Attorney General, can't for that piece. There's a wrongful death piece that's in there that gets into the Attorney General a little bit, but really it would be any citizen in the state of Indiana or anywhere in the U.S. for an act that occurred in Indiana could sue these distributors. And so it would go to federal court, and that would essentially start a cascade in my mind that would probably end up in the Supreme Court, because we're in uncharted territory, and that's typically what happens with those cases. And so I think that would be a good thing. I think we'd be very favorable in the Supreme Court on this type of legislation. The risk on the other side is none, because if they just kept it status quo, we'd be status quo. So I don't like to say that I'm bringing a bill to go to the Supreme Court. I think if it became policy and was law of the land, it'd be great. And so that's really the underlying goal. But I think we're set up really well if it gets challenged. And you know what? I actually hope they try to challenge it. But you know what? It's only private citizens, and it's not happened. So there's nothing for anybody to sue on. As somebody who lost a case based on standing, that's really important. And we can discuss the courts and law later, and Senator Brown can help us out there a little bit, but I'm not the lawyer up here. But it's really important that we set it up in a way that it can't really be challenged from a state standpoint or a state lawsuit. It would only be challengeable on appeal once a case is filed. And so from a approach, it's a pretty awesome legal avenue. Once again, very technical. I'd be happy to talk through it a little bit with anybody that has questions. But the goal is to get to federal court, have a case get heard. Be great to have it ruled against us and for it to stand and kind of cement things. But even if it's appealed, it'd be great to end up back in the Supreme Court on, because I think we win.
Zach, I think you had...
I know I can't help it. This bill is so brilliant. I just love to jump in on this. First, I don't want to spoil you going back and watching the hearing, because two quick thoughts on that. One is the other side testified and kept saying, well, this could create a chilling effect. And my first thought was like, yep. Welcome to our point. You know, it was actually entertaining. The second point that it made me think of was Senator Brown's comments, and again, I don't want to spoil it because I can't do her justice on this. Her point was the medical communities there saying, oh, this is going to create a chilling effect, and Senator Brown, you so eloquently said, if you're concerned that it's going to stop people from wanting to be basically OBGYNs in the state of Indiana because you can't do illegal abortions, see ya. Like, it was classic, because it was like, yeah, if your entire point of whether you want to be in Indiana or not and practice as an OBGYN is so you can do illegal abortions, sorry, I don't want you here in the Hoosier state anyway. Like, that's atrocious if you're willing to do that. So, yeah, there you go.
To another point of that is, I'm a practicing physician here in Indiana, so any provision of this law I have to live under. And one of the things that OBGYN said is, you're changing the law. We actually aren't changing any of our previous abortion law. This is all civil liability. It's a new structure. And so the crazy thing of all these people in white coats standing up is we exempt them in the first section of the bill. So any licensed Indiana physician is exempt from the provisions. And so it was interesting, and we'll see what they do on the other side, because I'm sure they're going to come out of the woodwork in the second chamber. But it was interesting to see them and then have to say, hey, and I told them ahead of time, you're all exempted from this bill. And so it was interesting to see them still kind of want to get out and kind of spout off about it, but it wasn't about the bill at all. It's about wanting to do abortions, or even illegal abortions, as Senator Brown so well pointed out.
Well, let's head into a speed round here, maybe just a minute or two. These are all great answers. I'm going to try to get to a few more of these questions. So back to Senator Brown. Is worsening mental health a valid life of the mother exception? If it is there a work or a way to narrow it down so that just worsening mental health is not an exception that allows an abortion?
Absolutely not an exception. I mean, I'll go back to what Zach said and what Abigail says. If the baby's not the problem, then abortion isn't the solution. Do we need to do more? Can we do more in this state to help mothers? Yes. We know about 50% of babies born are born to mothers on Medicaid. So I think we can honestly all presume that they probably don't all have the resources we need.
Back to Representative Judy. We, Indiana, only fund 6 organizations or funding for PCs and maternity homes, $0 in the budget for non-real alternative funded centers. Is there anything that can maybe be done moving forward on that?
I think those discussions need to start happening as soon as session ends with our fiscal leaders and along with the governor's office, and making that a priority in the upcoming budget for the. I think that's how we start that. And again, I think if you can get to the governor's office and make it anytime you can make it a governor's priority, I think that definitely helps. But also reaching out and meeting with our fiscal leaders and leadership and starting those talks now leading into the summer. I think if you start them in September, it's too late.
Okay. So I have another funding related question, so I might leave it there with you so you get all the money questions this morning. Hope Center Fort Wayne applied for a safety pin grant. I think there's 18 million, and PCs are not receiving any of that funding, and perhaps only 50 applications were submitted. Do you have any information about that?
I was not aware that the money had been released. So either of you? Well, that's make note of that, and then we'll make a call. I'll let Senator Brown talk on that as well.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the safety pin grant, and this is where we really need to sort of rewrite the ship, might only be given out through the Department of Health, whereas the pregnancy resource centers, that's a line item in our budget. So we know exactly where that money is going. It's not discretionary, and that's the problem. The Department of Health is not always helpful in the pro-life space. So if we're going to send out those resources, then we might have to take that back and put it in a line item.
Yes, whoever had asked that question, it'd probably be great to follow up afterward, I think, so we have a little more information on that. Senator Johnson, back to you. In light of your comment that pro-life agencies aren't as coordinated as they ought to be, how do we fix this? Is it a legislative fix? Is this an executive director to set up a statewide agency? Or is this up to the individual pro-life resource centers who can be territorial to instigate? How can we make this happen?
Yeah, maybe the only legislator. Representative Judy is about as less government as possible than I am, and government can help in some ways with information. I think that's probably the best way for the government to help. I don't want us to get directly involved with a lot of this stuff because government just doesn't do it very well. And so I think it's an information thing. It's a coordination from whether it's a phone number to call, a public messaging campaign, a website, those kind of things we could help do. And also we could create part of these grants as a process to build some of that stuff out. But I think the organizations have to drive that themselves. They have to be organized and cooperative, and really it's a competitive environment for those dollars sometimes. And so it would take a change in thought process a little bit to be a little bit more cooperative and just say, hey, we're kind of agnostic to who, but anybody in this space, this is where you go to get the information.
All right. Well, as we wind down our time this morning, our last question, what is the best way to pray for you and for other public servants? We'll start here with Senator Brown and go down the list.
Well, you're all going to have your individual prayers, but I just had Josh and I think 7 other pastors came to my office on Wednesday, and we prayed together. And whether or not I get a note sometimes, I used to get a note from this young family with young girls. Sometimes they'd leave me Rice Krispies treats too, but would tell me they were praying for me that day. And it really matters. We need it. We need constant prayers. These are not hard decisions and hard bills for us to carry, but we need the help and inspiration to have the right words to sometimes convince our fellow legislators that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's great to have prayer warriors back home. I've got a church family. I've got a family that prays for me. I've got members here that pray for me regularly, and it's a good thing. It's a great thing. But really, when it comes to us, this isn't a natural thing for me. Like, I'm the least likely person to ever run for office. So being in the public square, being in the debate, having the right things to say publicly, those are the big things to pray for. But praying for my family, this is hard on, I've got a 2-year-old all the way to an 18-year-old. It's probably the hardest thing on them. I'm happy to stand and take the arrows, but over the last year and a half, they've had to bear the brunt of a lot of this, and just praying for them would be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm always appreciative of the prayers. Like I said, when having a family with a 14-year-old daughter back home, and I try to actually drive home every night to get back home and sleep in my bed and then go back down in the morning. And I think just continue to, I pray for us, I think for humility, discernment in these decisions, and I think just it's always appreciated. I think, we did, had a lot of folks down during that 2022 session, that, constant prayer and wisdom and guidance. And believe it or not, we do that within even our own caucus before we go out onto the floor. And then we say we have folks come down from everybody's district, pastors, and pray actually before we start the General Assembly every day. We know we're in a spiritual battle. It's not only over the state, but each and every one of us. So constant prayer and being cognizant of everything. So thanks.
Well, and Zach, I do believe God hears prayers for lobbyists as well. Okay, so
Some of them at least, right?
Okay.
I think, just on a personal one, it'd just be like travel and being able to have great conversations and be an ear for these folks as they're going through a lot of what they're dealing with. I will say, my skin is not nearly as thick as these folks, so maybe prayers for guarding all of their hearts as they get sometimes unnecessarily attacked for a number of things that aren't true or don't hit home, but they may hit home on a personal level. So just the recognition that politics is kind of gross sometimes, and that these, again, goes back to my point earlier, that these are real people that have families and everything, and we need to treat them with care and respect, and policy stuff is different than personal attacks. And so just pray for their hearts, pray for their families. They have families that also see those things. The other last one I'll point is Public Servants Prayer, which is the organization that Matt, who is the State House chaplain, runs. Is a great organization, but if you're on social media, and I am old now and just have Facebook, that they'll send out an alert every single day, and they alert 3 people typically at the state level of government, and saying, here are the 3 people we're going to pray for today. And it may be a legislator, a judge on the Supreme Court, and someone else, but it's all elected officials or judicial appointees. And so it's good to be in prayer for even those folks that we don't know, because they need God's love just as much as we do.
That's good. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for coming out this morning. I'm grateful for all their work to champion the pro-life cause. Just a reminder, if you don't need that folder, you can leave it on the table. If you have a donation, it can be placed in the bucket back on the table. And we're now going to dismiss to our informal discussion time, so feel free to come up and touch base with the legislators. Thank you again for coming today.